My parents said they wouldn't attend my art exhibit. Painting isn't a career. You're just playing dress up in poverty. My brother chuckled, you sell doodles on Instagram. Grow up. I said quietly, this one's for everyone who laughed first. 3 days later, a celebrity bought my canvas for $75,000 and my parents cried during the speech they weren't invited to. I'm 28. My name's Mira. And I've spent most of my life being the disappointment in a very structured, upper-middle-class family in upstate New York. We lived in Saratoga Springs, a beautiful, picturesque town full of old money and newer people trying to look like old money. Think white porches, polo shirts, and hushed gossip in coffee shops. My parents, Genevieve and Russell, ran a tidy accounting firm on Broadway. Neighbors loved them. My dad played golf every other Sunday. My mom volunteered at the Historical Society. And my younger brother Casper was, well, the golden boy. I was always the odd one out. From as young as 6, I was drawing everywhere. On walls, napkins, even the inside of the pantry door. They called it a phase. Then it became a distraction. Eventually, it became a waste. Art was never seen as valuable in our home unless it hung in a country club. I still remember my mom once looking at a piece I did for a high school project. It was a self-portrait I had put a lot of myself into, and she just tilted her head and said, "Why are you so obsessed with sadness?" When it came time for college, they pushed hard for business or pre-law. I applied to the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan without telling them. Got in. Told them a month before classes started. It caused one of the worst fights we ever had. My dad actually asked if I was trying to embarrass them. They refused to help financially. I was cut off completely. Moved to New York with 2 suitcases, a tiny scholarship, and a waiting job already lined up. I worked nights at a late-night diner in the East Village. Painted during the day. Lived in a shared Bushwick apartment where the ceiling leaked, and the oven door didn't close. But I was alive. Exhausted, yes, but finally doing something that made sense to me. They never visited. Never asked to come. Every birthday call turned into a passive-aggressive intervention. You still at that cafe? Any thoughts on a graduate degree yet? Casper's doing great at Fidelity. Got promoted. Casper. He was the good one. Played lacrosse, interned at JP Morgan, bought a new BMW at 25. At family holidays, he was the star. I was the background character, tolerated at best. When I launched my Instagram art page, at Miramakes, I didn't even tell them. I knew what they'd say. And I was right. When they eventually saw it, my mom texted, "That's cute." Like a blog? Casper sent me a meme about starving artists. Still, I kept going. I built a modest following. Not huge, but enough to make connections. A woman named Sarita Romero found me online and reached out. She ran a gallery space in Dumbo and wanted me to contribute to a local showcase. That led to more invites, then solo features. I scraped by, but something was building. It wasn't instant, but it was real. And when I finally put together my own solo show, funded by my own savings, printed flyers, the works, I thought, just maybe, I'd get a flicker of support. I designed the show title specifically to reclaim all the jabs I'd heard over the years, playing dress up in poverty. I invited them anyway. I sent a formal printed invite to their house. My brother too. Just in case. No reply. 2 weeks before the opening, I got a voicemail from my mom. She said, almost gently, "Mira, we love you, but this isn't a path. It's a hobby. I hope you find something more secure soon. We won't be coming, but we're wishing you well." Then my brother sent a text that just said, "You sell doodles on Instagram. Grow up." I didn't reply. I didn't have the energy anymore. Opening night came. March 3rd. The space was electric. People I hadn't seen in years showed up. Sarita helped me with setup. I wore a dark blue dress I'd been saving since college. I stood there, under white lights, surrounded by 10 of the best pieces I'd ever created. The last piece in this series was called Inheritance. It was oil on an old wooden door I'd found in a scrapyard. A warped depiction of a house caving in, with a small child at the center surrounded by stiff, statue-like adults. The child was painting something bright, alone, but glowing. People kept circling back to it. And then she walked in. Renee Aldridge. If you don't recognize her name, she was a huge name in the late 90s and early 2000s. Think three-time Golden Globe nominee, moved to Paris, then came back and reinvented herself as an art patron. I had no idea she followed Sarita's work, let alone that she would show up. She stared at Inheritance for a long time. Said very little. Then pulled Sarita aside. They talked in low voices. Then Sarita walked over to me and said, "Mira, she wants to buy it. Full price. $75,000. No negotiations." I didn't cry. I just stood there. I nodded. Shook her hand. Renee said, "That piece, it's loud. It speaks. Don't lose that." It didn't feel real until after she left. When I stood up to give my closing speech, I didn't say names. I didn't doubt anyone. But I said, this collection is for everyone who laughed first. Who mistook passion for immaturity. Who told dreamers to grow up. Here's to proving them wrong, quietly, with paint. What I didn't know then. My cousin June had told my parents about the show after the article went live in The Cut. The headline was, "From Doodles to Dollars, Mira Ellery's $75,000 debut sale shocks art world." My parents drove down from Saratoga that weekend. They showed up at the gallery after closing. Peered through the window like they were trying to see into a life they no longer understood. They asked Sarita if I'd meet them. She told them I was busy. They cried. She told me later. I didn't respond to their texts that week. Or the next. But it didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, I started to see their names pop up in places they'd never been before. First, my mom followed my art account. Not just followed, it was the kind of quiet but obsessive following. She liked every post from the past year in one sitting. Then she emailed. Not a long message, but carefully worded. "We saw the article. Your father and I are surprised and proud. Your work is beautiful, Mira. Truly. We'd love to talk sometime." That was followed by a photo of the front page of the Saratogan, our town paper. They'd done a local spotlight after The Cut ran their piece. A blurry screenshot of me beside my painting, under the headline, "Local Artist Makes National Splash." My parents must have shared it, because it was suddenly everywhere. Their friends were messaging me. People I hadn't spoken to in 10 years were commenting on my posts like we'd always been close. One of them was Mrs. Kellerman, our old neighbor who once told me artists don't retire, they starve. She wrote, "So proud of your success, Mira. Your parents must be over the moon." It was like watching an alternate universe being constructed around me. Casper reached out again. This time, he wasn't snarky. "Saw the article. Congrats. That's a pretty big deal. Mom and Dad won't shut up about it." Again, I didn't reply. The thing is, it wasn't about the money. It never was. The sale just validated what I already knew, that what I did mattered. That art wasn't a detour from success, it was my version of it. But now that it came with a price tag, suddenly it was respectable. Suddenly I wasn't the failure anymore. I was their daughter again. My cousin June messaged me a few days later. "Just so you know, your mom cried when she saw your speech online. She said she didn't realize how hard it had been for you." I believe that, in her way, she meant it. But I also remembered how many times she'd cut my voice off mid-sentence when I tried to explain why art mattered to me. How she used to say, "I just don't want to see you struggle your whole life." But what she meant was, "I don't want to have to explain your life to other people." I didn't know how to respond to her message. So I didn't. A few weeks passed. The gallery sent me the check, and I cried quietly when I deposited it. Not out of greed, but because I finally had enough to breathe. I bought better paints. I bought a real easel. I replaced my space heater. Then my dad called. He never called. He always had my mom speak for both of them, like he didn't know how to talk to me unless it was about retirement planning or health insurance. But this time, he called. I let it go to voicemail. Hey Mira, it's Dad. I just wanted to say, we're proud of you. We may not have said it before, but we are. I saw the video of your speech. You spoke really well. You've grown into a strong woman. We'd love to come see you soon. Maybe even catch your next exhibit. Anyway, call when you can. I sat with that voicemail for 3 days. Played it a few times. Once on speaker. Once in the dark while I painted. I couldn't deny it, it felt good to hear. But also, off. They hadn't changed. Not really. They were just reacting to something measurable. Something that could be bragged about. Told to coworkers. Sent in Christmas cards. They weren't proud of the years I was broke and painting at 3 a.m. They weren't proud when I worked a double shift and still made a deadline. They weren't proud when I was quiet and determined and living off canned soup. They were proud now, because the world told them I was worth something. That hurt more than I thought it would. Still, I agreed to meet. Sarita warned me. She said, Mira, don't go to prove anything. Go because you're ready to see them, not because you need them to see you. I met them at a small bistro near Union Square. They picked it. It was classy, middle of the road, the kind of place they could feel comfortable and still tell their friends, oh yes, we visited the city. They both stood up when I walked in. My mom hugged me a little too tightly. My dad gave me this awkward shoulder pat, like he wasn't sure how to hold his pride without cracking it. The conversation was civil. They asked questions. Smiled too much. Nodded at everything I said. It felt rehearsed. Like a makeup dinner after a cancelled show. My mom said, we were shocked by how powerful your painting was. Really? The one with the house? It was so moving. I didn't know you were carrying all that. My dad added, we told a few people back home. They're thrilled for you. A few friends even went to your website. They meant well. I knew they did. But it was clear, they didn't understand the art, the process, or what any of it had cost me. They just saw the final product and wanted a seat at the table now that it was worth something. Casper didn't come. At one point, my mom leaned in and said softly, I hope you know, we've always loved you. We just didn't understand. I nodded. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed it. The bistro lights flickered above us as the server brought the check. My dad reached for it, like he always used to. I let him pay. That night, I walked back to my apartment feeling heavier than I expected. Not because I was angry. But because I realized something, they were trying now. But only because I had finally proven something to them. And part of me resented how long it took. But another part, the smaller part, still wanted to believe they meant it. I didn't reply to their next few messages right away. I needed space. Not because I was holding a grudge, but because I wasn't sure if I could let them in again without keeping a piece of myself locked away. And that was something I was still trying to figure out. A few weeks later, I was invited to participate in a panel discussion at the Pratt Institute, ironically, the kind of academic environment my parents would have celebrated if it had been about finance or law. The topic was finding voice through adversity, artists on art and resistance. I wasn't even sure who had submitted my name, but I accepted. The event was mid-April, just as New York was shaking off the last of winter. The campus was alive with students, artists, professors. The auditorium was modest but full, and it was the first time I'd ever sat on a stage with a microphone clipped to my shirt, being introduced by someone who used the words formidable presence and emotional clarity to describe my work. I still wasn't used to the language people used around me now. Words like vision, catalyst, innovative. It felt flattering, sure, but distant from the girl who once sobbed on the L train because she couldn't afford gesso. During the Q&A portion, a woman from the audience asked me, "Do you feel like your family supports you now?" There was a moment where everything inside me stalled. I could feel my mouth form the beginning of a diplomatic answer, something about healing and growth, and how support can look different over time. But instead, I said, "They support the version of me they can brag about." I'm still figuring out how to feel about that. There was a short silence, then a few heads nodded. One of the other panelists glanced over and gave a slow, almost imperceptible smile, like they knew exactly what I meant. Afterward, I got messages from a handful of people who related. One woman told me her parents only acknowledged her career in culinary arts after she catered for a senator. Another man said his father didn't acknowledge his writing until he saw his byline in the Atlantic. It's funny how so many of us grow up thinking that success will finally earn us love. Or at least, approval. But then you get it, and the love feels conditional. One night, I got a text from Casper. It was random, no context. It just said, "Do you really think they don't love you?" I stared at it for a long time. It was 11:34 p.m. I was sitting in my studio space, still half covered in charcoal dust, finishing a piece for an upcoming show called Quiet Wars. The piece was a grayscale triptych of silhouettes in doorways, each looking in, never entering. I didn't respond to him right away. He followed up with, "They're flawed. But they're trying. You could meet them halfway." Meet them halfway. That phrase lodged itself in my chest like a shard. Because the thing was, I had been meeting them halfway my entire life. Giving up small pieces of my truth so they'd be more comfortable. Dumbing down my dreams so they didn't feel embarrassed explaining them. Pretending I wasn't hurt when they were silent. I typed and deleted a dozen responses. Finally, I wrote, "I'm not angry. I'm tired." He read it. No reply. A few days later, my mom sent a long email. Longer than any she'd written before. No punctuation emojis. No deflections. It began with, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said at your exhibit." She went on to explain things I hadn't heard her say, not even once in my entire life. That she had grown up with nothing. That she was told security was the only kind of success that mattered. That when I started painting, it scared her, not because she thought I wasn't good, but because she thought I wouldn't survive. She wrote, "I realize now that I confused love with protection. I didn't know how to love your dream without also fearing it would hurt you. I didn't know how to respond." I cried when I read it, out of confusion, maybe some guilt. Maybe grief. For the years I'd wanted to hear something like that and never did. But part of me was suspicious, still. How much of this was because I was now, officially, successful? Would she have said any of this if I were still waitressing and painting in a freezing apartment? And was that even a fair question? I started seeing a therapist around that time. Not for any particular breakdown, but because things were getting louder in my head. I was receiving praise and opportunities and money. But also ghosts. Ghosts of conversations that never happened, holidays that felt like punishment, silence at the dinner table. One session, I told my therapist, "I don't know how to let my parents back in without becoming smaller again." She nodded slowly. "So maybe you don't let them in all the way. Maybe you open a window instead of a door." I thought about that for a long time. A window. Around that same time, Sarita called me with news. An international arts foundation had picked up my name. They were hosting an artist residency in Florence, Italy. 3 months. Expenses paid. Private studio. A space to just create. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. I didn't tell my parents right away. I let it sit with me for a few days. When I finally did call my mom to tell her, there was a pause. Then she said, "That's amazing, Mira. Really? I hope you'll send pictures." She didn't ask how I got it. She didn't make it about how proud she was. Just, "Send pictures." And for the first time in a long time, that felt okay. Casper messaged me later. Mom cried. Dad pretended he didn't. I didn't respond to that either. Not because I didn't care, but because I was still learning how to carry my wins without shrinking them to make others feel comfortable. I started painting again with a new kind of quiet, less defensive, more certain. My brush strokes weren't begging to be seen. They just were. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't ready to throw open the door either. And maybe that's what healing looks like. Just a little more space between the past and now. A little more light through the window. I left for Florence in early June, just as Manhattan started to swell with summer heat and sidewalk sweat. When the plane lifted, I didn't look back through the window. Not because I was angry, because I was finally allowed to look forward. The residency was everything I didn't know I needed. For the first time, I was making art without the background noise of needing to prove something. I was surrounded by other artists, sculptors, muralists, digital artists, dancers. Some were world-renowned. Others were like me, just finally getting their legs under them. We talked over wine late into the night, sketched in courtyards, wandered through alleyways until inspiration bit. And my work changed. Not in some big, dramatic way. But it softened. It had less fight and more breath. I started a new series I called Home as a Myth, portraits without faces, rooms without furniture, doorways that opened into fog. It was about absence. About learning to live with it. My studio walls were covered in these pieces by the end of the second month. The director of the residency walked in one morning, stared for a long time, and said, "You've found your language." It wasn't long before galleries in Florence and Rome started reaching out. The residency had connections, and word spread. One gallery wanted to buy 3 pieces before the residency even ended. Another offered to host a solo show in the fall. I was stunned, but also steady. I felt solid in myself for the first time. And that's when I decided it was time. Time for a real show. Not just in another gallery, but back home. Not in Saratoga Springs, no, I didn't owe them that. But close enough. Albany. It was perfect. Urban, gritty, artistic in quiet, underrated ways. I contacted a gallery I'd admired for years, The Corridor. They were known for highlighting voices that challenged tradition. They said yes within a week. I titled the show, Unseen Rooms. Subtle, but anyone who knew me would recognize the reference. I sent invites to all the people who mattered, artists, collectors, writers, friends. And I sent one to my parents. No call. No reply. But I knew they'd show. The day of the opening, the gallery was warm with chatter. People walked the room slowly, quietly. I wore a navy blazer and linen pants. Simple, but strong. Sarita flew in. So did Renee Aldridge. People were taking photos, quoting the work, writing notes. But I kept scanning the room, waiting. And then I saw them. My parents. My mom wore a beige blouse I'd seen her wear to board meetings. My dad had on a pressed gray jacket, stiff and unsure. They hovered near the entrance for a while, watching, as if they weren't sure whether they were allowed to enter. Casper showed up too, oddly enough, wearing sneakers with his suit jacket. He nodded when he saw me. I didn't go to them right away. I let them take in the space. Let them read the title cards, the descriptions, the blurbs I had written about each piece. Each one was deliberate. No anger, but no appeasement either. One painting in particular stopped them. A canvas titled, "Permission Not Given." It was a wide gray hallway, with a door at the end that had no knob. I watched from across the room as my mom read the blurb beneath it, for the times I waited for approval that never came. I built my own door instead. She turned away quickly. Eventually, they came to me. My mother smiled, but it was tired. My father just stood beside her, his hands folded in front of him. I didn't know, she said quietly, looking around at the walls. I didn't know it would all be this big. I nodded. It was always big. You just never looked at it. Casper shifted beside her. You could have told them what you were going through, Mira. I met his eyes. I did. You just laughed. He flinched, just slightly. And for once, he didn't deflect. My mom took a deep breath. We're proud of you. Truly. I stared at her. I didn't feel the usual swirl of rage or need. Instead, I said calmly, I know. But pride is easy now. It's cheap when it comes after everyone else has already clapped. There was silence. Not defensive, not angry. Just truth sitting between us. You're still our daughter, my dad said softly. I nodded again. That doesn't change. But what I allow in does. He blinked, like he didn't quite understand. I continued, you'll always be my parents. But you don't get front row seats anymore. You chose the hallway for years. That's where you'll stay. They didn't argue. My mother looked like she might cry, but she held it in. My dad just nodded once, his eyes cast downward. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't cruel. But it was final. I walked away then, toward Sarita and a woman from a New York Times art column who wanted to do an interview. The gallery lights warmed my shoulders. The soft hum of people engaging with my work filled the space. Behind me, I heard footsteps fade. That night, after the exhibit, I got a text from Casper. Casper, I get it now. I really do. I'm sorry. I replied. It took a long time. But so did I. We're even. The article came out a week later. A glowing review. The final paragraph read, Mira Ellery has taken the rooms of her past and repainted them into galleries. The ones who laughed first may never be invited back, but they'll always hear the applause from the hallway. And I let them. Not out of spite. But because I had finally built a world where their permission wasn't necessary. And that, more than any sale or article or standing ovation, that was the real win.